I'm Beth Comstock. We're here in Austin, Texas, looking at the future with Parag Khanna. This is the future in 5. Take a minute and explain who you are and what you're doing these days.
Parag Khanna, as you know, I live in Singapore, but I'm American. I have a background in academics, political science. I work for the government, for the military. I do a lot of work on scenarios and future planning, National Intelligence Council and other agencies. I've been at Brookings and New America. My books mostly look at the long-term interdisciplinary future when you combine geopolitics, macroeconomics, technological, social, environmental trends.
I'm a big fan of connectography, which is a really interesting look at the way the world's connected. Talk a little bit about the book's been out about a year, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's been almost a year.
What was your hope in putting that book out?
My hope was the ambition was to reinterpret human history through the lens of physical infrastructure, transportation, energy, and communications, the corridors that connect particularly our cities. So I not reimagine, because I think this is factual. The world is an urban network civilization. That is what we are. Most of the world's population lives in cities. Our cities are connected through ever more dense infrastructure, specifically oil and gas pipelines, electricity grids, high-speed railways, internet cables. So I reinterpret who we are and where we're going. And the economic data points in that direction, and even our geopolitical trends actually show us that the decision-making that many countries are making are driven by the calculus of cities and the businesses in cities.
Right now in a time in the world where it seems we're going much more tribal, much more national, yet we're so connected. How do we make sense of that disconnect?
So some are becoming more tribal, more parochial, more local, more isolationist, but that doesn't mean that the world is. Let's take migration. Last year, the same year that some European countries declared that they want to rip up the Schengen Agreement for intra-European migration, or Brexit, they want to control their borders. That is a stunningly small percentage of the world population. You look at emerging markets, for example. Look at Africa, 1.2, 1.3 billion people. ASEAN, Southeast Asia, 700 million people. That's 2 billion people, and their leaders got together last year and said, we want to bring down all borders, we want free mobility of labor, we want visa-free migration. So in the same year that our media is focused on what a couple of million people have done, 2 billion people said, bring down these borders. So most of the world's population right now lives in countries that are very pragmatic and not populist. So am I really worried about Trump and Brexit and so forth? I'm actually not. I have seen populist parties in Germany and other countries rise and fall within a year or two, and you've never heard of them. Because at the end of the day, these movements self-liquidate. They ultimately realize that when you have to run a country, you're running a connected country. Because the more countries we have, the more we depend on importing food, fuel, water, the more we're trade dependent, investment dependent.
Well, technology is certainly making us even more connected.
And even if you're not physically leaving your country as a person, of course our society.
So you talked earlier about cities and the value of cities as this magnet for talent and innovation and economic well-being. Cities are getting bigger,
yes,
and everyone's going to be moving to cities. What's the future scenario look like?
So because cities are becoming everything, there isn't one future for cities, right? So the largest Western cities, LA, New York, London, Moscow, have about 10 to 15 million people in their greater municipal regions. In Asia, the mega cities have anywhere from 30 to 60 million people, an order of magnitude. So the life in those places is going to look very different from life in London today. There are still lessons that East can learn from West, without a doubt, especially when it comes to technology, efficiency, public transportation, mobility. Oh, it's absolutely around energy efficient buildings. It's around public transportation, sort of the spread of it, the accessibility of it. Affordable housing that some Western cities have done well, others haven't. These are critical when you think about emerging markets where you don't have safety nets, where you don't have high incomes, and where you have tens of millions of people. So there has to be amongst East-West cities a very, very robust exchange. I'm all for it. That's what I write about and try to support.
We're sitting here, some people very anxious about the future. How do you feel about the future?
I'm actually very optimistic, but for two reasons. One is when push comes to shove, our back is against the wall, we realize that certain things are existential. Clean energy to cope with climate change and mitigate the effects of sea level rise, temperature rise, and so forth. So the fact that we have the technological tools to cope with today's problems, but just haven't scaled them fast enough, when we see when our back is against the wall, we will do it. That's A. That's almost the bad argument for progress, because you shouldn't wait till the last minute. The good argument is that the cost of these technologies is coming down. We have hyper innovative companies like GE and many others that are saying, let's do this now. Right?
Parag Khanna, thank you. You make us think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.